The gunshot that shattered the parlor window sent Emma Wallace diving behind her mother's velvet settee, her heart hammering so violently she thought it might break through her ribs. It was not an assassination attempt, merely her fiancé demonstrating what he called his marksmanship to her horrified parents in the front yard of their modest ranch house outside Lincoln, Nebraska. But the message was clear enough. Victor Ashford owned everything he touched, and soon he would own her too. Emma pressed her palm against the floorboards, feeling the grit of Nebraska dust that worked its way through every crack and crevice, no matter how often they swept. It was April of 1876, and the spring winds carried the scent of new grass and possibility. But for Emma, there was only the suffocating certainty of her approaching wedding. 3 weeks. She had 3 weeks before she would be bound to a man whose cold eyes held nothing but possession and whose casual cruelty extended to every living thing unfortunate enough to fall under his control. Her father had been desperate when he arranged the match. Their ranch was failing, the cattle sick with disease, and the bank threatening foreclosure. Victor Ashford had money, land, and influence stretching from Lincoln to Omaha. He wanted a young wife to bear his children and grace his dinner table, and he had chosen Emma with the same detachment he might show when purchasing a horse. She was 19 years old, reasonably pretty with dark auburn hair and green eyes, healthy enough for childbearing, and educated enough to avoid embarrassing him in polite company. That she might have dreams or desires of her own had never entered the equation. Another shot rang out, followed by Victor's booming laugh. Emma heard her father's weak chuckle in response, the sound of a man who had sold his soul and was trying to convince himself the price was fair. Her mother had stopped speaking 3 days after the engagement was announced, moving through the house like a ghost, unable to meet her daughter's eyes. Emma rose slowly, smoothing her simple cotton dress. She walked to the shattered window and looked out at the man who would be her husband. Victor was 42 years old, thick around the middle, with a florid face that spoke of too much whiskey and too much rich food. His clothes were expensive, his boots polished to a high shine, and he wore his wealth like armor. As she watched, he raised his pistol and shot at a sparrow perched on the fence post. He missed, and the bird flew away unharmed. But the casual violence of the gesture made Emma's stomach turn. She had to leave. The realization crystallized in her mind with perfect clarity. She could not marry this man. She would not. Even if it meant abandoning everything she had ever known, even if it meant breaking her parents' hearts and condemning them to poverty, she could not stand before God and promise to honor and obey Victor Ashford. She would rather die in a ditch somewhere than live as his property. The planning took 2 weeks of careful preparation. Emma began hiding food in her room, small amounts that would not be missed. Dried beef, hard biscuits, a small wheel of cheese. She had $37 saved from years of birthday gifts and small household allowances, tucked into a leather pouch she wore around her neck. She packed a single carpet bag with 2 changes of clothes, sturdy walking boots, and her grandmother's silver locket. Everything else would have to be left behind. She chose a moonless night, slipping from her bedroom window while her parents slept. The ranch was quiet, save for the endless Nebraska wind and the distant howl of a coyote. Emma had lived her entire life on this land, and leaving felt like tearing away a part of herself, but fear drove her forward. She walked east toward Lincoln, 5 miles of dark road, her carpet bag growing heavier with each step. Lincoln was awake despite the late hour. Saloons spilled light and noise onto the dusty streets, and Emma kept to the shadows, her heart in her throat. She had never been in town alone after dark, and every shadow seemed to hide danger. She made her way to the train depot, hoping to buy passage on the first train heading anywhere, but the ticket window was closed until morning. Emma found a spot behind a stack of freight crates and huddled there, trying to make herself invisible. The April night was cold, and she had not thought to bring a blanket. She wrapped her arms around herself and tried not to think about what would happen when her parents discovered her gone. Victor would be furious. He was not a man who accepted defiance, and he had the resources to track her down. She needed to get far away, fast. Morning came with aching slowness. Emma bought a ticket to Cheyenne with shaking hands, telling the clerk she was traveling to meet her aunt. The train would not leave for another 3 hours, so she sat on a bench in the depot, trying to look inconspicuous, while her mind raced with anxiety. Every time the door opened, she expected to see Victor striding through, his face purple with rage. She was staring at her worn boots, trying to will time to move faster when she heard horses outside. Multiple horses moving fast. Emma's blood turned to ice. Through the depot window, she could see Victor Ashford dismounting, accompanied by 2 of his ranch hands. Her father was with them, looking gray and defeated. There was no time to think. Emma grabbed her bag and bolted for the back door of the depot, bursting into the bright morning sunlight. She ran without direction, pure panic driving her legs. Behind her, she heard Victor's voice raised in anger, heard the thunder of boots on wooden planks. Lincoln's main street was busy with morning commerce, wagons and riders and pedestrians going about their business. Emma wove between them, her lungs burning, her carpet bag banging against her leg. She had no plan, no destination, only the desperate need to not be caught. She rounded a corner and collided hard with a solid body. Strong hands caught her before she could fall, and Emma looked up into a pair of startled blue eyes set in a sun-bronzed face. The man was young, perhaps 25, tall and lean, with dark brown hair that needed cutting, and a few days' worth of stubble on his jaw. He wore dusty trail clothes and a battered hat, and there was something steady in his gaze that made Emma want to weep with relief. "Whoa there, miss," he said, his voice a low drawl with traces of Texas in the vowels. "Where are you running to in such a hurry?" "Please," Emma gasped, gripping his arms. "Please, I need help. There is a man chasing me. He wants to force me into marriage. I cannot let him catch me." The cowboy's expression shifted, his jaw tightening. "That so?" He glanced over her shoulder, and Emma knew Victor must be visible on the street behind her. "Well now, seems to me that is a problem needs solving." "Please," Emma said again, and she could hear the desperation in her own voice. "I do not have much money, but I can pay you something if you help me get away." "Keep your money, miss." The cowboy was still looking past her, his blue eyes narrowed in assessment. "I have got a better idea. Might be a touch unconventional, but I reckon it would solve your problem permanent-like." "Anything," Emma said. "I will do anything." The cowboy smiled then, a quick flash of white teeth that transformed his serious face. "Well then, miss, whatever your name is, how do you feel about getting married, right now, I mean, to me?" Emma stared at him, certain she had misheard. "What?" "Marriage," he repeated calmly. "If you are already married to someone else, then this fellow chasing you does not have much of a claim anymore, does he?" He tilted his head thoughtfully. "I am heading to Cheyenne myself, got work waiting there. You could come along, we could get the marriage annulled once you are safe if that is what you want, but it would get you out of your immediate trouble." It was insane. It was the most insane thing Emma had ever heard. She did not know this man's name, had met him 30 seconds ago, and he was proposing marriage as casually as he might suggest sharing a cup of coffee. Behind her, she heard Victor's voice getting closer. "Emma! Emma Wallace, you stop right there!" The cowboy raised his eyebrows. "Clock is ticking, miss. What do you say?" Emma made her decision in a heartbeat. Yes, let us do it." "Well, all right then." The cowboy took her hand, his grip warm and calloused. "Judge Wilson's office is just up the street. He is usually about this hour. Name is James Norton, by the way, but folks call me James." "Emma Wallace," she managed as he pulled her into motion, walking quickly but not running, keeping his body between her and the street. "Thank you. I do not know how to thank you." "Save your thanks till after," James said. "This might still go sideways." Judge Wilson was indeed in his office, a small room above the general store that smelled of pipe tobacco and old paper. He was a portly man with impressive white whiskers and a skeptical expression that deepened when James and Emma tumbled through his door. "Judge, we need to get married," James announced without preamble. "Right now, if you please." Judge Wilson set down his pen. "That's so, and why the rush, Mr. Norton?" "Lady has got an unwanted suitor who does not take no for an answer," James said bluntly. "We are looking to make the situation legally impossible for him." The judge's expression shifted to one of understanding. He had clearly seen his share of human drama in his years on the bench. "I see. Miss, is this your choice? No one is forcing you into this?" "I choose this," Emma said firmly, though her voice shook. "My family tried to make me marry a cruel man. I would rather marry a stranger than go back to that." Judge Wilson nodded slowly. "Fair enough. You got a witness handy, Mr. Norton? Give me 2 minutes." James stuck his head out the door and called down to the street. "Hey, Tom, need you up here for a minute?" A moment later, another cowboy appeared. This one older with a weather-beaten face and curious brown eyes. James explained the situation in quick sentences, and Tom's expression went from confused to sympathetic to grimly amused. "Well, hell, James, horse," Tom said. "When you said you had business in Lincoln, I did not figure you meant getting hitched." "Life is full of surprises," James replied. "You willing to witness?" "Reckon so." Tom pulled off his hat respectfully and nodded to Emma. "Madam." Judge Wilson pulled out the necessary papers and began the ceremony. Emma's hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold her carpetbag, so James took it gently from her and set it aside. His own hands were steady as he took both of hers, and there was something reassuring about his calm presence. The ceremony was brief and businesslike. Judge Wilson asked the required questions, and Emma heard herself responding in a voice that seemed to come from very far away. When James spoke his vows, his Texas drawl was clear and unhurried, as though promising to love and cherish a complete stranger was perfectly normal. "Do you have a ring?" Judge Wilson asked. James hesitated, then pulled a simple silver band from his own hand. "Belonged to my mother," he said quietly to Emma. "She would not mind the loan of it." Emma's vision blurred with tears as he slid the too large ring onto her finger. She curled her hand into a fist to keep it from falling off. "Then by the power vested in me by the state of Nebraska, I pronounce you husband and wife," Judge Wilson intoned. "You may kiss your bride, Mr. Norton." James looked at Emma, a question in his blue eyes. She nodded slightly, and he leaned down to press a chaste kiss to her cheek, careful and respectful. His lips were warm, and he smelled of leather and sage. "There now," Judge Wilson said, signing the marriage certificate with a flourish. "All legal and proper. Congratulations to you both." Emma was staring at the signed document, proof of her marriage to James Norton, when heavy footsteps sounded on the stairs. The door flew open, and Victor Ashford filled the doorway, his face indeed purple with rage. Her father hovered behind him, looking ill. "Emma!" Victor's voice was a roar. "What do you think you are doing? You are coming with me right now!" Emma shrank back, and immediately James stepped in front of her, his relaxed demeanor evaporating into something hard and dangerous. "The lady is not going anywhere with you," James said quietly. "Get out of my way, boy," Victor snarled. "That is my fiancée you are standing in front of." "Actually," Judge Wilson interjected mildly, holding up the marriage certificate, "she is Mrs. Norton now. Just performed the ceremony myself, all legal and binding. You are about 10 minutes too late, Mr. Ashford." The silence that followed was deafening. Emma watched Victor's face go through a series of emotions, shock, disbelief, and then a rage so towering she took an involuntary step backward. James remained motionless, but she could feel the tension in his stance, like a coiled spring ready to release. "This is impossible," Victor said, his voice dangerously low. "Wallace, you are going to sort this out. That is your daughter. You already agreed to the engagement." Emma's father finally spoke, his voice weak. "Emma, what have you done?" I saved myself, Father, Emma said, finding her courage. She stepped out from behind James so she could see her father's face. I could not marry him. I would have died first. You knew what kind of man he is, and you gave me to him anyway. You ungrateful little... Victor started forward, and James moved faster than Emma would have thought possible, putting himself squarely between them. That is far enough, James said, and there was iron in his voice now. You are not going to touch her, talk to her, or breathe near her. She is my wife now, and she is under my protection. You have got a problem with that. We can step outside and discuss it. Victor was a bigger man, heavier through the chest and shoulders, but there was something in James's eyes that gave him pause. Emma saw the calculation happening, saw Victor weighing his options and his pride against the reality of the situation. You have no idea what you have just done, Victor said finally, directing his words at Emma. Your family ranch is finished, the bank will foreclose within a month, and your parents will be out on the street. That is on you. The words hit Emma like a physical blow. She had known this would happen, had accepted it as the price of her freedom, but hearing it spoken aloud made it real and terrible. Actually, Judge Wilson said conversationally, I believe that is extortion, Mr. Ashford. You just threatened financial ruin on a family because their daughter refused to marry you. That is not strictly legal, you know. Victor's face flushed darker. You stay out of this, old man. I am an officer of the court, Mr. Ashford, and I do not take kindly to threats being made in my presence. Judge Wilson stood up, drawing himself to his full height, which was not particularly impressive, but carried the weight of authority nonetheless. I suggest you leave now before I start thinking about filing charges. For a long moment Victor did not move, his pale eyes fixed on Emma with a look of such venom that she felt it like a brand. This is not over, he said softly, not by a long shot. Then he turned and stormed out, his boots thundering on the stairs. Emma's father lingered in the doorway, looking at his daughter with an expression she could not read: anger, disappointment, maybe a trace of relief. Emma, he said, and his voice cracked. I am so sorry, but we had no choice. You had a choice, Father, Emma said, and she was surprised by how steady she sounded. You chose wrong. I hope you and Mother will be all right, truly I do, but I could not sacrifice myself to save the ranch. Her father nodded slowly, defeat written in every line of his body. I suppose not. I hope you know what you are doing. He looked at James. You take care of her, you hear? She is a good girl, deserves better than what she has had. I will, sir, James said quietly. Then her father too was gone, his footsteps fading away, and Emma was left standing in Judge Wilson's office, married to a man whose last name she now shared and whose face she had first seen less than an hour ago. The judge cleared his throat. Well, that was exciting. Mrs. Norton, I hope you will be very happy. He handed the marriage certificate to James. I would suggest you two leave town fairly quickly. Victor Ashford is not known for his even temper, and he has friends who are less concerned with legality than I am. Already planning on it, James said. He looked at Emma, and his expression was kind. We have got horses waiting at the stable. Can you ride? Yes, Emma said. She had grown up on a ranch, after all, even if it was a failing one. Good. We will head out within the hour, make for Cheyenne. That suit you? Emma nodded, not trusting her voice. The enormity of what she had just done was beginning to sink in. She was married to a stranger, and leaving the only home she had ever known to travel into the unknown. James must have seen something in her face because his expression softened. Hey, it is going to be all right. I know this is strange and scary, but I promise I'm not going to hurt you. We will get you somewhere safe, and then we can figure out what comes next, all right? All right, Emma whispered. Tom, who had been standing silent witness to the whole dramatic scene, finally spoke up. Well, hell of a morning this turned out to be. Come on, you two. Let us get moving before that Ashford fellow comes back with reinforcements. They left Judge Wilson's office and made their way through Lincoln streets to the livery stable. Emma kept expecting to see Victor around every corner, but the town was going about its normal business, unaware of the small drama that had just played out. James retrieved 3 horses, a rangy bay gelding for himself, a solid chestnut for Tom, and a pretty gray mare for Emma. "This is Willow," James said, patting the mare's neck. "She's got a sweet temperament. She will take good care of you." Emma approached the horse slowly, letting Willow sniff her hand. The mare's dark eyes were gentle, and she whickered softly. Emma felt some of her panic recede. Horses, she understood. Horses made sense. James helped her secure her carpet bag behind the saddle, then offered his linked hands to boost her up. Emma settled into the saddle, adjusting her skirts as modestly as she could. She had ridden astride plenty of times growing up, much to her mother's disapproval, and it felt natural to gather the reins. "You look like you know what you're doing," James observed with approval. He swung up onto his own horse with easy grace. "We have got about a day and a half of hard riding to Cheyenne, maybe 2 if we take it easier. You let me know if you need to stop and rest, all right? No shame in it." "I will be fine," Emma said, and she was surprised to find she meant it. Yes, her entire life had just been turned upside down. And yes, she had married a complete stranger in a desperate bid for freedom, but she was free. Victor could not touch her now. Whatever came next, it would be on her terms. They rode out of Lincoln as the sun climbed toward noon, heading west along the Emigrant Trail. The Nebraska plains stretched endlessly in all directions, spring grass turning the earth green and gold, wildflowers beginning to bloom in scattered patches of color. The sky was that particular brilliant blue that seemed to go on forever, unmarred by even a wisp of cloud. Tom rode ahead as a scout, and James kept pace beside Emma, occasionally glancing over as if to make sure she was holding up. For a long time they rode in silence, the only sounds the steady rhythm of hoofbeats and the wind through the grass. Finally, Emma found her voice. "Why did you do that?" James looked over at her. "Do what?" "Marry me. You do not know anything about me. I could be a terrible person. I could be lying about everything." James considered this for a moment. "Could be," he agreed, "but I do not think you are. You had the look of someone genuinely afraid, and that fellow Ashford had the look of someone who enjoys causing fear. Did not sit right with me the thought of leaving you to that fate." He shrugged. "Besides, I have always been impulsive. Drives my brother crazy." "You have a brother?" "2 brothers, actually, and a sister. They are all back in Texas, running the family ranch. I am the wandering type. Never could stay put for long." He smiled slightly. "Reckon they are going to be mighty surprised when they find out I got married." Emma looked down at the too large ring on her finger. "You said this was your mother's?" "Yes, madam. She passed when I was 16. Fever took her quick." There was old grief in his voice, but it was the kind that had been lived with and accepted. "She was a good woman, strong. I think she would have liked what we did today." "I am sorry for your loss," Emma said quietly. Then, because it seemed important to be honest, "My mother is alive, but she stopped speaking to me after the engagement was announced. I think she was ashamed that she could not protect me from it." "That must have been hard." "It was." Emma blinked back tears. "I hope she will understand why I ran. Someday I hope I can explain it to her." They rode on, and gradually Emma felt herself beginning to relax. James was easy to be around, she discovered. He did not press her with questions, did not make demands, just rode beside her with a quiet competence that was deeply reassuring. When they stopped to water the horses at a creek, he helped her down with careful courtesy, and when she stumbled on stiff legs, he caught her without comment. "First day of hard riding is always the worst," he said. "You will get your trail legs back soon enough." They ate a quick meal of jerky and hardtack, sharing a canteen of water. Tom sat apart, tactfully giving them space, and Emma was grateful for it. She felt like her emotions were too close to the surface, liable to spill over at any moment. "What is waiting for you in Cheyenne?" she asked James as they prepared to mount up again. "Job on a ranch north of the city. Owner is looking for someone to help break horses, and that is my particular skill." Work should last through the summer at least. Maybe longer if I prove myself. He paused. I was not lying earlier, Emma. If you want to get the marriage annulled once we reach Cheyenne, I understand. I know this was not what you would have chosen if you had other options. Emma looked at him. This stranger who was now her husband. He was handsome in a rough, weathered way, with honest eyes and a calm manner. More importantly, he had asked her what she wanted. That alone set him apart from every other man in her life. Can I think about it? She asked. I do not know what I want yet. Everything has happened so fast. Of course, James said. It's take all the time you need. Meanwhile, we are legally married, and that means you are under my protection. Anyone wants to bother you, they will have to go through me first. The simple declaration warmed something in Emma's chest. Thank you, James, for everything. You are welcome, Emma. He smiled at her, and it reached his eyes, crinkling the corners. Now come on, we have got a lot of ground to cover before nightfall. They rode through the afternoon, the landscape gradually changing as they moved west. The grass grew shorter, the land more rolling. They passed homesteads and small ranches, saw cattle grazing in the distance. Once they encountered a small wagon train heading east, and the families waved in greeting. Emma waved back, wondering what they would think if they knew her story. As the sun began to sink toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Tom found them a good campsite near a stand of cottonwood trees. There was water and shelter from the wind, and enough dried wood for a fire. James helped Emma down from Willow, and this time when her legs protested, he simply steadied her with a hand on her elbow until she found her balance. You did good today, he told her. A lot of folks could not have kept up the pace you set. I grew up riding, Emma said, but she was pleased by the compliment nonetheless. Tom got a fire going while James tended to the horses, brushing them down and hobbling them where they could graze. Emma felt useless standing there, so she dug into her carpet bag for the food she had packed. It was not much, but combined with what the men had, it would make a decent meal. They ate as the stars came out, an impossible multitude scattered across the darkening sky. Emma had seen the stars from her family's ranch, of course, but somehow they seemed brighter out here, away from even the modest lights of Lincoln. She tilted her head back, tracing the familiar constellations. Beautiful, is it not? James said softly. He was sitting across the fire from her, his face half in shadow. Yes, Emma agreed. I never get tired of looking at the stars. Me neither. That is one of the reasons I like the trail. You get to see the sky proper, without buildings or trees in the way. He poked at the fire with a stick. When I was a kid, my pa used to tell me the stars were holes poked in the curtain of night, showing heaven's light beyond. I always liked that idea. That is beautiful, Emma said. She wrapped her arms around her knees, feeling the day's exhaustion settling into her bones. Your father, is he still in Texas? No, he died about 5 years back. Heart just stopped one day while he was mending a fence, quick and clean, which I suppose is the best any of us can hope for. James looked up at the stars. I still miss him, though. He was a good man. Taught us right from wrong. Tom had already rolled himself up in his blanket and appeared to be asleep, or at least giving them privacy. Emma was acutely aware that she was alone with her new husband. That night was falling, and that she had no idea what expectations he might have. As if reading her mind, James spoke quietly. I am going to lay out my bedroll over there by that tree. You can have the spot by the fire. Keep warm. Tomorrow we will stop in a town, see about getting you some proper trail clothes and supplies. That dress is not going to hold up to much more hard riding. Relief flooded through Emma. Thank you? Emma. James waited until she looked at him. I meant what I said. I am not going to hurt you, and I'm not going to force anything on you. This marriage may be legal, but it is not real in the ways that matter. Not yet, anyway. Maybe not ever, if that is what you decide, but you are safe with me. I need you to believe that. Emma studied his face in the firelight and saw only sincerity. I believe you, she said, and realized she did. She slept that night wrapped in James's spare blanket, with the fire crackling nearby and the sound of horses moving peacefully in the darkness. It should have been frightening, sleeping out under the stars with two men she barely knew, miles from anything she could call home. Instead, Emma felt something she had not experienced in months: hope. The next day brought more riding, her muscles protesting every movement until they warmed up. James set a slightly easier pace, and they stopped more frequently to rest the horses. Around midday, they reached a small town called Grayson. Barely more than a cluster of buildings along the trail, but it had a general store and a place to stable the horses. James bought Emma a divided riding skirt, a sturdy shirt, a wide-brimmed hat, and a proper trail coat. When she protested the expense, he shook his head. "You are going to need proper gear if you are traveling with us. Besides, you are my wife now. Taking care of you is my responsibility." The word wife still sounded strange to Emma's ears, but she was grateful for the new clothes. She changed in a back room of the store, and when she emerged in her trail outfit, James nodded in approval. "Much better. How does it feel?" "Like I can actually breathe," Emma admitted. The heavy skirts of her dress had been hot and cumbersome. The divided skirt was a revelation, allowing her to move freely. They ate a hot meal at the town's single restaurant, and Emma realized it was the first proper food she had eaten since running away. The beef stew was simple but filling, and the bread was fresh and warm. She ate until she was pleasantly full, feeling strength returning to her body. As they prepared to leave Grayson, James bought a bedroll for Emma along with a canteen and other trail necessities. He also, she noticed, bought ammunition for his pistol and rifle. When he caught her looking, he shrugged. "Better to have it and not need it," he said. "This is still wild country, Emma. Most folks are decent, but not all." They reached Cheyenne late the following afternoon, riding in with the sun at their backs. The city was larger than Lincoln, bustling with commerce and life. Cattle pens lined the railroad, and the air smelled of livestock and coal smoke. People crowded the streets: cowboys, railroad workers, businessmen, families. It was noisy and chaotic and alive. James led them to a modest hotel on a quieter street. "We will stay here tonight, give you a chance to rest proper," he told Emma. "Tomorrow I need to head out to the ranch, see about that job. You can stay here in town if you want, or you can come with me. Your choice." Emma did not hesitate. "I will come with you." The hotel room was small but clean, with a real bed and a wash basin. Tom got his own room down the hall, and James set Emma's carpet bag on the chair by the window. "I am going to go stable the horses and get them proper feed," he said. "Lock the door behind me and do not open it for anyone but me. I will knock 3 times like this." He demonstrated 3 quick raps. "I will," Emma promised. Alone in the room, Emma sat on the edge of the bed and tried to process everything that had happened. 2 days ago, she had been trapped in Lincoln, counting down the days to a marriage she dreaded. Now she was in Cheyenne, married to a different man entirely, facing an uncertain future. It should have been terrifying. Instead, she felt a strange sense of peace. James returned an hour later with his promised knock, bringing with him food from a nearby restaurant and news. "The ranch is about 10 miles north of here. Owner's name is Fletcher. Runs about 500 head of cattle and breeds horses on the side. He is expecting me tomorrow. I sent word that my wife would be accompanying me." "What did you tell him?" Emma asked, accepting the plate of chicken and potatoes he handed her. "That we were recently married and you had nowhere else to go." "Which is the truth, more or less." James sat down in the room's single chair, balancing his own plate. "Fletcher is supposed to be a fair man. I am hoping he will let you stay in one of the ranch houses. If not, we will figure something else out." They ate in companionable silence. Emma found herself watching James when he was not looking, trying to understand the man she had married. He moved with an easy confidence, economical in his gestures, but there was a gentleness to him as well. The way he had helped her on and off her horse, the way he made sure she was fed and comfortable. He could have taken advantage of the situation in a dozen different ways, but instead he treated her with respect. "James," she said suddenly, "why are you not married already? I mean, before me. You seem like the kind of man women would want to marry." He looked surprised by the question, then thoughtful. I suppose I never stayed in one place long enough. I left Texas when I was 21, been wandering ever since. Worked cattle drives, broke horses, did whatever work I could find. Never seemed like the right time to settle down. He smiled slightly. Guess I just had not met the right woman yet? Emma felt her cheeks warm. You met me when I ran into you fleeing my engagement. True enough, but I am starting to think that was fate's way of doing things. His blue eyes were serious. I know we have not known each other long, Emma, and I know this is not how anyone plans to start a marriage. But I have got a good feeling about you, about us. Maybe, if you are willing to give this a chance. Emma's heart was beating very fast. What are you saying? I am saying maybe we do not get the marriage annulled. Maybe we see where this goes. James leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. I like you, Emma Wallace, Norton. I like the way you did not fall apart when things got scary. I like the way you sit a horse and the way you look at the stars. I think maybe we could build something good together, if we both wanted to try. Emma set down her plate with shaking hands. You are proposing we stay married, for real? Yes, madam, I am. James met her eyes steadily, but only if that is what you want. I will not trap you the way that Ashford fellow tried to. If you want out, just say the word, and I will do whatever it takes to make that happen. But if you want to stay, if you want to see what this could be, then I am willing to try. More than willing. Emma looked down at the silver ring on her finger, too large and sliding around. She thought about Victor and his cold, possessive eyes. She thought about her parents and the ranch that would be lost. She thought about the future she had imagined for herself, vague and uncertain, but somehow full of possibility. And she thought about James, who had stepped between her and danger without hesitation, who had offered his mother's ring and his protection, who was looking at her now with such open hopefulness that it made her heart ache. I want to try, she heard herself say. I want to see where this goes. The smile that spread across James's face was like sunrise. Yeah? Yeah, Emma said, and she was smiling too. I do not know if this will work, James. I do not know if we can build a real marriage out of what we have, but I want to try. That is all I'm asking for, James said, a chance. He stood up and crossed to the bed, dropping to one knee beside it so they were at eye level. Emma Norton, I promise you right here and now that I'm going to do everything in my power to make you happy. I am going to protect you and provide for you and treat you with the respect you deserve. And I am going to wait, however long it takes, for you to feel safe with me. Really safe in all the ways that matter. Emma felt tears pricking her eyes. James, you do not have to say anything. I just needed you to know. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand. His fingers were warm and calloused, his grip gentle. We're going to be all right, Emma. I promise you that. Emma squeezed his hand, feeling the rightness of it settle into her bones. I believe you. That night, James slept in the chair with a blanket, insisting Emma take the bed. She protested, but he was immovable on the subject. You have been through too much these past few days. You need proper rest. He settled into the chair, tipping his hat over his eyes. Besides, I have slept in worse places. This is downright luxurious compared to some camps I have made. Emma lay in the darkness, listening to James's quiet breathing, and felt something warm unfurling in her chest. It might have been hope. It might have been the beginning of something deeper. Either way, she fell asleep with a smile on her face. Fletcher's ranch was everything James had promised and more. The main house was a sprawling structure of wood and stone surrounded by outbuildings and corrals. Horses grazed in nearby pastures, and cattle dotted the rolling hills beyond. The ranch hands were weathered men who eyed Emma with curiosity but tipped their hats respectfully. Mr. Fletcher himself was a big man in his 50s, with iron-gray hair and shrewd eyes. He shook James's hand, assessed him with a glance, then turned his attention to Emma. So you are Norton's wife. He mentioned you in his letter. Fletcher's voice was gruff but not unkind. You run away from trouble, girl? Emma lifted her chin. Yes, sir, I did. Good for you. Too many folks stay in situations that are killing them just because leaving seems harder. He nodded as if she had passed some test. We have got a foreman's cabin that has been empty since last fall. You and Norton can have it long as he does his work proper. I will, sir, James said. You have my word on that. The cabin was small but sturdy, with a main room that served as kitchen and living space, a separate bedroom, and a loft for storage. It was furnished simply a table and chairs, a pot-bellied stove, a bed frame with a rope mattress that would need a new tick. Emma walked through it, seeing not what it was, but what it could be. We can make this work, she said, turning to James with a smile. This could be a real home. James looked around the cabin, then at Emma, and his expression was soft. Yeah, I think it could. They spent the next few days settling in. James started his work with the horses, and Emma discovered that Fletcher's wife, Margaret, was eager for female company. Margaret was a no-nonsense woman with kind eyes and capable hands, and she took Emma under her wing without question. I ran away from a bad situation once myself, Margaret told Emma one afternoon as they worked in the vegetable garden behind the main house. That was 30 years ago, but I remember what it felt like the world was ending and beginning all at once. That's exactly what it feels like, Emma said, pulling weeds from between the rows of young plants. You will be all right, honey. You have got a good man in James Norton. I have seen the way he looks at you. Margaret's smile was knowing. That is not a man who is going to let you down. Emma felt her cheeks warm. We barely know each other. So? Some folks know each other for years and never really see one another. Others meet and just know. Margaret patted Emma's hand. Give it time. You will figure out what you have got together. The work on the ranch was hard but satisfying. Emma helped Margaret with the garden, learned to manage the chickens, and began sewing new curtains for the cabin. James worked from dawn to dusk with the horses, coming home each evening dusty and exhausted but satisfied. They fell into a routine. Emma would have dinner ready when James came home. Simple fare, but hot and filling. They would eat together at the small table, talking about their days. Afterwards, James would wash up while Emma cleaned the dishes, and then they would sit outside on the cabin's small porch, watching the sun set over the hills. James still slept in the main room, giving Emma the bedroom, though the rope bed was big enough for two. He never pushed, never suggested anything different. He was patient in a way that made Emma's heart ache with gratitude and something else she was not quite ready to name. 3 weeks after they arrived at the ranch, a rider came from town with a letter for Emma. It was from her mother, and Emma's hands shook as she opened it. The letter was brief and written in her mother's careful script. Her father had managed to negotiate with the bank, selling off most of their land but keeping the house and a small parcel. Victor had moved on, engaged to a girl from Omaha, and her mother wanted Emma to know that she was not angry, that she understood why Emma had run, and that she hoped Emma was safe and happy wherever she had landed. Emma read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down her face. When James came home that evening, she showed it to him wordlessly. He read it carefully, then pulled her into his arms. It was the first time he had really held her, and Emma melted into his embrace, her face pressed against his chest. He smelled of horses and leather and sun-warmed cotton, and his arms were strong and safe around her. I am glad she understands, James murmured into her hair. I am glad you have that peace. Me too, Emma whispered. She pulled back to look up at him, and suddenly she was aware of how close they were, how blue his eyes were, how his hand was gentle on her back. James, He waited, patient as always, giving her space to find her words. I think I'm falling in love with you, Emma said in a rush. I know it is fast, I know it is crazy, but I cannot help it. You are kind and patient and good, and you make me feel safe in a way I have never felt before. I just wanted you to know. James's face transformed, joy lighting him from within. Emma, honey, I have been half in love with you since the moment you looked up at me with those green eyes and asked for help. He cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing away her tears. I did not want to rush you, did not want to push, but God, I have been hoping you might feel the same way. I do, Emma said. I really do. Can I kiss you? James asked, his voice rough with emotion. For real this time? Emma nodded, and James lowered his mouth to hers. The kiss was gentle at first, questioning, but when Emma's arms came up around his neck, it deepened into something that made her toes curl in her boots. He kissed her like she was precious, like she was something to be cherished, and Emma poured all of her feelings into kissing him back. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, James rested his forehead against hers. I love you, Emma Norton, he said. I know we have got a lot to learn about each other still, but I love you. And I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret saying yes to me. I could never regret it, Emma promised. You saved me, James, in every way that matters. That night, Emma invited James to share the bed. He went slowly, always checking to make sure she was comfortable. And when he made love to her for the first time, it was with such tenderness that Emma cried again, but this time from happiness. Afterwards, lying in his arms with her head on his chest and his fingers trailing through her hair, Emma felt a contentment she had never imagined possible. Are you all right? James asked softly. I am perfect, Emma said, and she meant it. I am exactly where I am supposed to be. The summer passed in a golden blur. Emma's relationship with James deepened, the initial spark growing into something solid and enduring. They learned each other's rhythms, discovered each other's habits and quirks. Emma learned that James sang when he worked with the horses, old trail songs in his Texas drawl. James learned that Emma liked to watch thunderstorms from the porch, that she had a talent for sewing, and that she could make even the simplest ingredients into something delicious. They had their first argument in July, a silly thing about whether to plant more vegetables or let the garden rest. Emma said something sharp. James replied in kind. And suddenly they were both angry, voices raised. Emma stormed out of the cabin, ready to spend the night at the main house if necessary, but James caught up with her halfway there. Emma, wait, please. She stopped, arms crossed, still fuming. I'm sorry, James said. I should not have raised my voice, and you are right about the garden. You know more about that than I do. I was just being stubborn. Emma felt her anger deflate. I am sorry too. I did not mean to snap at you. We are going to argue sometimes, James said, stepping closer. We are two different people, and we are still learning how to be together. But I do not want to go to bed angry with you, Emma. Life is too short for that. Emma reached for his hand. I do not want that either. They walked back to the cabin together, and later, lying in bed, Emma realized something important. They had fought, and they had worked through it. That was what real marriages did. They were not playing at being married anymore. They were building something real. In August, Emma realized she was pregnant. She had missed her monthly courses twice, and the morning sickness was undeniable. The discovery filled her with a complex mix of emotions, joy, fear, excitement, worry. She told James that evening, watching his face carefully for his reaction. He stared at her for a long moment, and then a slow smile spread across his face. We are going to have a baby? Yes, Emma said. Are you happy? Happy? James swept her up into his arms, spinning her around until she laughed and begged him to stop. Emma, I am thrilled. Terrified, but thrilled. We are going to be parents. Margaret confirmed the pregnancy and gave Emma advice on what to expect. You are young and healthy. You should do just fine, she said confidently. And that husband of yours is going to drive you crazy with worry. Mark my words. Men get silly when their wives are carrying. She was right. James became almost comically protective, insisting Emma rest more, not lift anything heavy, eat more food. Emma bore it with good humor, secretly touched by his concern. The baby was due in early spring. As fall arrived and the air turned crisp, Emma began sewing tiny clothes and blankets. James built a cradle from cottonwood, sanding it smooth and carving their initials into the headboard. They were nesting, preparing for the new life that would join them. In October, Tom came back through on his way south for the winter. He stayed for dinner, marveling at how settled Emma and James looked. "I have got to say, James, when you decided to get married on the spur of the moment, I thought you might have lost your mind," Tom said, grinning. "But looking at you two now, I think maybe you knew exactly what you were doing." "I got lucky," James said, taking Emma's hand across the table. "Or real lucky." "We both did," Emma corrected softly. Winter came to the Nebraska-Wyoming border in earnest, bringing snow and cold winds. The cabin was snug, though, and James had laid in plenty of firewood. They spent the long evenings by the stove, James reading aloud from the few books they owned while Emma sewed or knitted. Sometimes they just talked, sharing stories from their pasts, their dreams for the future. "I want to have our own ranch someday," James told her one night. "Not right away, but eventually. I want land we can pass down to our children, a place that is ours." "I would like that," Emma said. Her belly was rounding now, the baby a definite presence. "But I am happy here too, James. As long as we are together, I am home." Christmas came, and the Fletcher family invited them to the main house for dinner. It was a warm, boisterous affair with too much food and singing and laughter. Emma felt the baby kick during the meal, and she guided James's hand to her belly so he could feel it too. The wonder on his face made her fall in love with him all over again. In February, a blizzard swept through, pinning them inside the cabin for 3 days. The snow piled up to the windows, and the world became a white wilderness. James kept the fire going while Emma cooked, and they told stories, played cards, and made love in the warm nest of their bed. It should have been frightening being trapped by the storm, but instead Emma felt cocooned and safe. "I used to be afraid of being trapped," she told James one night, lying in his arms. "After my father arranged the engagement, I felt like the walls were closing in, but this, being snowed in with you, it does not feel like a trap. It feels like shelter." "That is what marriage should be, Mom," James said, kissing her forehead. "Shelter from the storms. We protect each other, Emma, always." In late March, as the snow began to melt and the first hints of green appeared on the hills, Emma went into labor. Margaret came immediately, shooing James out of the cabin despite his protests. "This is women's work," Margaret said firmly. "You go wait with Mr. Fletcher and try not to wear a hole in the porch from pacing." The labor was long and hard. Emma had known it would be painful, but the reality was beyond anything she had imagined. Margaret coached her through it, wiping her face with cool cloths and telling her she was doing wonderfully. As the hours stretched on and the pain became unbearable, Emma cried out for James. He burst through the door before Margaret could stop him, his face pale with worry. "Emma, I am here. I am right here." He took her hand, and Emma gripped it so hard she knew she must be hurting him, but he never flinched. He stayed beside her, murmuring encouragement, and somehow his presence made it bearable. Finally, as dawn broke outside the cabin windows, the baby came. A lusty wail filled the room, and Emma collapsed back against the pillows, exhausted and triumphant. "It is a boy," Margaret announced, wrapping the baby in a blanket. "A big, healthy boy." She placed the baby in Emma's arms, and Emma looked down at her son through tears of joy. He was red-faced and angry at the world, but he was perfect. Dark hair plastered to his skull, eyes squinting against the light, tiny fists waving. "James," Emma whispered, "look at him. We made him." James was staring at his son with an expression of pure awe. Carefully, reverently, he touched one of those tiny fists, and the baby's fingers immediately curled around his. James made a sound that was half laugh, half sob. "He is perfect," James said hoarsely. "Emma, he is perfect. You are perfect." He kissed her temple, her cheek, her lips. "Thank you. Thank you for him. Thank you for everything." They named him William, after James's father. William Norton, born on the cusp of spring in a foreman's cabin on a ranch in Wyoming territory. Emma looked at her husband and her son and felt her heart might burst from how full it was. The months after William's birth were exhausting and wonderful in equal measure. Emma had not known it was possible to love someone so much it hurt, but every time she looked at her son, that was exactly what she felt. James was a devoted father, taking William from her arms whenever he could to give her a rest, singing those old trail songs as he paced the cabin floor with his son on his shoulder. "You are a natural at this," Emma told him one night, watching him rock William to sleep. "I had good examples growing up," James said. "My pa was always patient with us kids. I figure if I can do half as well by William as pa did by me, I will be doing all right." William grew and thrived. By summer, he was a chubby, happy baby who smiled at everything and everyone. The ranch hands doted on him, and Margaret declared him the most beautiful child she had ever seen, which made Emma laugh because Margaret said that about every baby. Life settled into a new rhythm. Emma's days revolved around William, feeding him, changing him, playing with him as he discovered his world. James worked with the horses, and his reputation grew. Fletcher began sending him to other ranches to break difficult horses, and the extra money went into a savings jar they kept hidden in the cabin. "For the ranch," James would say every time he added coins to the jar. "Our own land, someday." In the fall, Emma received another letter from her mother. Her father had died peacefully in his sleep, and her mother was moving to Omaha to live with her sister. She wanted Emma to know that her father's last words had been about Emma, that he had hoped she was happy, that he was sorry for trying to force her into a life she did not want. Emma cried for the father she had loved despite everything, for the relationship that had broken but might have been healed given time. James held her through her grief, and gradually the pain eased into acceptance. "I forgive him," Emma told James one night. "He was trying to save the ranch, trying to protect my mother. He made the wrong choice, but I understand why he made it, and I am grateful that he knew I was safe before he died." "He would be proud of you," James said, "of the life you have built, the mother you are. I am sure of it." The years rolled by, each one bringing its own joys and challenges. When William was 2, Emma gave birth to a daughter they named Sarah. Sarah had Emma's red hair and James's blue eyes, and from the moment she could crawl, she followed her older brother everywhere. The ranch prospered, and so did the Norton family. James's skill with horses became renowned throughout the territory, and Fletcher raised his wages twice. The savings jar filled slowly but surely, with the dream of their own land growing more tangible. When William was 5 and Sarah was 3, James came home one evening with news. "There is a ranch for sale about 15 miles from here. Owner died, and his widow wants to move back east to her family. It is not as big as this place, maybe 200 acres, but it has good water and grazing. I rode out to look at it today, Emma, and it is perfect." Emma's heart leaped. "Can we afford it?" "With what we have got saved and a loan from the bank, yes. It would be tight for a while, but we could do it. We could have our own place." James's eyes were shining. "What do you say? You want to take the risk?" Emma did not hesitate. "Yes, let us do it." Buying the ranch was terrifying and exhilarating. They said goodbye to Fletcher and Margaret, who hugged them both and made them promise to visit often. They loaded their possessions into a borrowed wagon and moved to their new home on a bright spring morning. The house was smaller than the foreman's cabin, just 2 rooms and a loft, but it was theirs. The land stretched out around them, full of possibility. James immediately began making plans where to build a barn, where to expand the house, which pastures to use for what. That first night in their own home, after the children were asleep in the loft, Emma and James stood outside looking at their land under the stars. "We did it," Emma said softly. "When we actually did it." "We did," James agreed. He pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "From a desperate marriage in Judge Wilson's office to this. Sometimes I can hardly believe it." Emma leaned back against him, feeling the solid warmth of his body, the steady beat of his heart. "I can believe it. We worked for this, James. We built this together. Best decision I ever made, marrying you that day," James murmured into her hair. "Best decision I ever made." saying yes, Emma replied. The ranch was hard work, harder than anything they had done before. Some days Emma wondered if they had made a mistake, if they had bitten off more than they could chew. But then she would see James working in the corral with a new horse, or watch William and Sarah playing in the yard, and she knew they had made the right choice. They acquired their first cattle, just 20 head to start. James built a barn with help from neighboring ranchers, and Emma planted a big garden. They got chickens and a milk cow. Slowly, piece by piece, they built their ranch into something real. More children followed. A son they named Thomas, then another daughter, Grace, and finally, when Emma was 31 and thought she was done having babies, twin boys they named Jack and Henry. The house had to be expanded twice to fit their growing family, and the noise and chaos of 5 children filled every corner. Emma looked at her life and marveled at it. She had run away from a forced marriage to a cruel man, and in doing so, had found the love of her life. She had gone from a desperate girl fleeing in the night to a woman with a home, a family, and a future she had built with her own hands. James's hair began to silver at the temples as the years passed, and Emma found laugh lines settling around her eyes. But the way they looked at each other never changed. He still made her heart race when he smiled at her across the dinner table. She still felt safest in his arms at night. When William turned 18, he announced he wanted to go to college in Denver to study veterinary medicine. Emma's instinct was to keep him close, but James supported the decision. We raised him to think for himself, James reminded Emma gently. Now we have got to trust that he will make good choices. William left in the fall, and Emma cried for a week. But he came home for Christmas with stories of his classes and his friends, and Emma realized her son was becoming a man she was proud of. Sarah married a young rancher from the next county over when she was 20, a kind man named David who looked at her the way James looked at Emma. The wedding was held at the ranch on a perfect June day, with all their neighbors and friends in attendance. Emma watched Sarah say her vows and remembered her own wedding in Judge Wilson's office, quick and desperate. How far they had all come. The younger children grew and found their own paths. Thomas took over much of the ranch work, partnering with James. Grace became a teacher at the school in the nearest town. The twins, Jack and Henry, were inseparable, working together to start a horse trading business that flourished. Emma and James became grandparents, first when Sarah gave birth to a daughter, then when William married and had a son of his own. Watching James with his grandchildren, so patient and loving, filled Emma with a contentment she could hardly put into words. They had been married 32 years when Emma woke one morning to find James watching her with that same look of wonder he had worn on their wedding day. "What are you thinking about?" she asked, reaching up to touch his face. "How lucky I am," James said simply. "I was just thinking about that day in Lincoln when you ran into me. What if I had taken a different street that morning? What if I had not been there when you needed help? I almost cannot bear to think about it." "But you were there," Emma said. "You saved me, James. You gave me a life I never dared to dream of." "You saved me too, you know," James said. "I was just wandering, going from job to job with no real purpose. You gave me a reason to put down roots. You gave me a home." Emma kissed him, putting decades of love and gratitude into it. "We saved each other." They celebrated their 35th anniversary with all their children and grandchildren gathered at the ranch. The house was full to bursting with family, noise, and laughter. Emma looked around the table at dinner at James's weathered, beloved face, at her children grown and happy, at her grandchildren playing and squabbling, and felt her heart overflow. After everyone had gone to bed, Emma and James sat on the porch as they had done 1,000 times before. The stars were out, brilliant and infinite, and the night was quiet except for the wind in the grass. "Do you have any regrets?" Emma asked, taking James's hand. He was quiet for a moment, considering. "Not a single one. You?" "Not one," Emma said firmly. "Running away that night was the scariest thing I had ever done. Marrying you was the craziest. But they were also the best decisions of my life." James brought her hand to his lips and kissed it. Here is to making crazy decisions that turn out right." Emma laughed. "I will drink to that." They sat together in the darkness, two people who had found each other in desperation and built a love that had lasted a lifetime. The ranch spread around them, the land they had worked and nurtured, the legacy they would leave to their children. And above them the stars shone down, the same stars that had watched over them on their first night together on the trail to Cheyenne. Emma leaned her head on James's shoulder, feeling the peaceful rightness of being exactly where she belonged. She had escaped a forced engagement to a cruel man, and a cowboy had married her before Victor could object. It had been an impulsive, desperate act that should never have worked. Instead, it had given her everything. Years continued to pass with the gentle rhythm of seasons on the land. Emma was 54 when James took sick with pneumonia one harsh winter. For 3 terrible weeks, she nursed him, terrified she would lose him. Their children came home, gathering around their father's bedside. But James was tough as the land that had raised him, and slowly, stubbornly, he fought his way back to health. "You are not getting rid of me that easy," he told Emma, when he was finally well enough to sit up and eat solid food. "We have got too many grandchildren to spoil yet." Emma had never been so grateful for anything in her life. She held his hand and wept with relief. The ranch continued to prosper under Thomas's capable management, and Emma finally allowed herself to slow down a bit. She spent more time with her grandchildren, teaching them to cook and sew, telling them stories about the old days. They loved the story of how she and James had met, how he had married her in Judge Wilson's office to save her from Victor Ashford. "Was that scary, Grandma?" her granddaughter Mary asked one day. "Marrying someone you just met?" "Terrifying," Emma admitted. "But sometimes the scary choices are the right ones. And sometimes, if you are very lucky, a leap of faith lands you exactly where you are supposed to be." James retired from the heavy ranch work when he was 62, passing the responsibility fully to Thomas while remaining as an advisor. He and Emma spent their days in companionable routine, working in the garden, taking slow rides around the property, sitting on the porch in the evenings. They had earned their peace, and they savored it. Emma was 61 when Victor Ashford died. She read about it in the newspaper. He had passed away in Omaha, survived by his third wife and no children. The article mentioned his various business interests and his wealth, but there was no warmth in it, no sense that he would be missed. Emma showed the article to James without comment. "Good riddance," James said flatly. Then, more gently, "Are you all right?" "I am fine," Emma said, and realized she meant it. Victor was part of a past that felt like it belonged to a different person. The frightened girl who had run from him was gone, replaced by a woman who had lived a full and happy life. "I was just thinking how different everything would have been if you had not been standing on that corner in Lincoln that day." "Everything happens for a reason," James said. "I truly believe that." They celebrated their 40th anniversary quietly, just the two of them and their children. William gave a toast that made Emma cry, talking about how his parents had shown him what real love looked like, how they had built something beautiful out of nothing but courage and commitment. "You taught us that love is a choice you make every day," William said, raising his glass. "That marriage is not about how you start, but how you keep going. Thank you for showing us the way." Emma and James held hands under the table, fingers intertwined, and Emma knew that every hard day, every sacrifice, every moment of doubt had been worth it to arrive at this moment, surrounded by the family they had built together. The new century came, bringing changes to the world around them. Automobiles began appearing on the roads, and electricity reached the nearest town. Their grandchildren grew up in a world that was different from the one Emma and James had known, but the ranch remained a constant, solid, and enduring. Emma was 68 when James woke her one night, his expression urgent. "Emma, I need you to listen to me." Fear clutched at her heart. "What is wrong? Are you sick again?" No, nothing like that. I am fine." James took both her hands. "I just had a dream about when we first met. It was so vivid, Emma. I could smell the dust on Lincoln streets, could see your face when you looked up at me, so scared and brave at the same time, and I woke up and needed to tell you something." "What?" Emma asked, her heart pounding. "That I would do it all again in a heartbeat. Every single moment, every decision, every hard day and good day. If I had to go back to that morning in Lincoln knowing everything that would come after, I would still step in front of you. I would still offer you my mother's ring. I would still choose you, Emma, always and forever." Tears spilled down Emma's cheeks. "James Norton, after all these years, you can still make me cry." "Happy tears, I hope." "The happiest," Emma promised. She kissed him, tasting salt and love. "I would choose you too. Every time, I would choose you." They lay back down, holding each other in the darkness, and Emma felt the weight and wonder of their shared history. 43 years of marriage, of building a life from scratch, of raising children and weathering storms. 43 years since a desperate girl had collided with a kind cowboy and changed both their lives forever. James died peacefully in his sleep 3 years later, just shy of his 75th birthday. Emma woke to find him beside her, his face relaxed and calm, gone from her in the quietest possible way. The grief was crushing, a physical weight that made it hard to breathe, but even through the pain, she was grateful. Grateful that he had not suffered, that they had had so many years together, that their last words to each other the night before had been, "I love you." The funeral was held at the ranch, and it seemed like half the territory came to pay their respects. James had been loved and respected by everyone who knew him, and the stories people told painted a picture of a man who had lived with integrity and kindness. Emma stood by his grave with their children and grandchildren around her, and she told James one more time, silently in her heart, that choosing him had been the best thing she had ever done. The years after James's death were hard. Emma had never been alone in her adult life, and his absence was a constant ache. But her family rallied around her, refusing to let her sink into grief. Her children visited frequently, her grandchildren came to stay, and the ranch continued to thrive under Thomas's management. Emma lived 6 more years, seeing the birth of great-grandchildren, watching her family grow and flourish. She spent her days quietly, tending her garden, writing letters, sitting on the porch, and remembering the silver ring James had given her so long ago was worn thin now. But she never took it off. On a spring day, much like the one when William had been born, Emma felt her strength beginning to fade. She was 80 years old, and her body was simply tired. Thomas wanted to send for the doctor, but Emma shook her head. "It is just my time, sweetheart. That is all." She asked to be moved to the porch, where she could see the land one last time. Her children and grandchildren gathered around her, and Emma looked at each of their faces, memorizing them, loving them. "I want you all to know," she said, her voice weak but clear, "that I have had the most wonderful life. I was so blessed, more than I ever deserved. Take care of each other, love each other, and remember that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is take a chance on happiness." As the sun set over the ranch, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose, Emma closed her eyes and let go. Her last thought was of James, young and strong as he had been that day in Lincoln, holding out his hand to her with a smile. She took his hand, and together they walked into the light. Emma Norton was buried beside her husband on a hillside overlooking the ranch they had built together. The headstone was simple. Emma Wallace Norton, 1857-1937, beloved wife, mother, grandmother. She was brave enough to run, wise enough to stay. The ranch remained in the Norton family for generations after, a testament to what two people could build when they chose love over fear, courage over safety, and each other over everything else. And on quiet spring evenings, when the wind blew just right through the grass, people swore they could hear the echo of laughter and the sound of a man singing old trail songs, holding his wife close as the stars came out overhead. The story of Emma and James Norton became family legend, told and retold to each new generation. The details might have changed slightly over the years, embellished here and smoothed there, but the heart of it remained the same. A desperate girl running from a cruel fate, a cowboy brave enough to offer her his name, and a marriage that began in panic and grew into a love that lasted beyond lifetimes. Their great-great-grandchildren would stand on that same hillside, looking out over land that had been in the family for over a century, and marvel at the courage it must have taken to make that leap, to say yes to a stranger, to trust in possibility over certainty, to build something lasting from the flimsiest of foundations. But Emma and James had known something important, that love is not found in perfect circumstances, but rather is forged through choice and commitment. They had chosen each other on a dusty street in Lincoln, Nebraska in 1876, and they had continued choosing each other every day thereafter, through hard times and good, through sickness and health, through all the ordinary and extraordinary moments that make up a life. Their story was one of courage and kindness, of second chances and hard-won happiness. It was proof that sometimes the craziest decisions turn out to be the wisest, and that sometimes, if you are brave enough to reach for what you need, fate will reach back. Emma had escaped a forced engagement to a cruel man, and a cowboy had married her before Victor could object. That single act of desperate courage had rippled forward through time, creating a family, a legacy, a love story for the ages. And that, in the end, was the greatest gift they gave to those who came after, the knowledge that it is never too late to save yourself, that help can come from the most unexpected places, and that true love, when you find it, is worth any risk. The ranch stood as their monument, acres of good grazing land and solid buildings, worked by capable hands descended from the union of a frightened girl and a kind cowboy. But the real testament to Emma and James Norton was not in the land or the buildings or even the family that bore their name. It was in the story itself, passed down through generations, a reminder that sometimes the best things in life come from the bravest decisions, and that love, real lasting love, can grow from the smallest seed of hope into something that spans lifetimes. On spring evenings when the new grass was green and the wildflowers bloomed across the hills, you could almost feel their presence still lingering on the land they had loved. Emma and James Norton, together in death as they had been in life, watching over the legacy they had built with courage, commitment, and a love that had defied every expectation. Their story was complete, a circle closed, a life well lived. From a panicked flight through the streets of Lincoln to a peaceful ending on a porch overlooking land that would bear their name for generations, Emma and James had traveled a journey that proved love could conquer fear, that kindness could defeat cruelty, and that sometimes, just sometimes, fairy tales do come true. Even in the Wild West, where life was hard and uncertain, where danger lurked around every corner and survival was never guaranteed, love had found a way. Two strangers had become partners, partners had become lovers, and lovers had built something that would outlast them both. And so their story ended, not with an open question or an unresolved thread, but with the satisfaction of a life fully lived, and a love that had conquered every obstacle. Emma and James Norton had taken a wild chance on each other, and in doing so had created something beautiful and lasting. Their legacy lived on in the land, in the family, and in the story that would be told as long as anyone remembered the name Norton. A story of courage and love, of desperate chances and hard-won happiness, of a cowboy and the woman he saved, who in turn saved him right back. It was a love story for the ages, born in the Wild West and lasting beyond time itself. And it all began with a girl running for her life, and a man brave enough to stand in her defense, to offer his name and protection, to take a chance on a stranger who would become his whole world. That was the story of Emma and James Norton, complete and whole, a a testament to the power of love and the courage of the human heart, and it was in every way that mattered a perfect ending.